All right, folks, we're going to get started here in just a minute with this week's guest. Super excited because today we're talking a little bit of software. So as folks trickle in, we will get it started. But we are a little tiny bit early today, which is truly shocking for me. Welcome. If you're just tuning in, we're going to get started in just a minute here and get our guest up on stage. Super excited today because we're going to talk a little bit of software, a little bit of services, everything in between. So give us a second while we get set up and folks are trickling in. Welcome back, or welcome for the first time to the Leap. We're going to get going in just a second here. Let's see. All right. It worked the first time, man. Oh, wow. Everything's in retrograde. I heard every planet on Earth, so every planet on Earth.
We proved them wrong.
Yeah, truly. Jake, thank you so much for joining us today. Super excited to chat and catch up. We're gonna do a little intro while folks trickle in, and then we'll get it going if that sounds good to you.
Yeah, excited to be here. I feel like an old man saying this is my first Instagram live.
Yeah.
But here I am. No, my first one as a guest. Yeah.
Yeah, we find that like people kind of hang out here on Instagram. So this is a good format for us to just have like a really candid conversation and let folks come in and out at their leisure. So I'm definitely excited to jump into some of these topics that we've got going on. So for everybody who is joining us for the first time, or maybe you're coming back, I'm Rachel Rennick. I am the co-founder and CEO of Wethos, which is a platform that helps freelancers form what we call virtual studios. So it makes it really easy to price complex projects and split payments. About every other week, I interview a different creative entrepreneur about their journey to taking the leap into starting a freelance business. This week, really excited about our guest because he has sort of crossed over from the services side to the software side, the dark side now. And so I think we're going to dive into some topics that, I know a lot of folks might be curious about. So Jake, welcome. Jake Kahana, he's a designer and entrepreneur. He's had a really long and fruitful career freelancing for big brands like WeWork, Johnson & Johnson. He is also the co-founder of a company called Caveday, which is reshaping the way the world works, basically through these guided group focus sessions, which is, as a person with ADHD, like really interesting concept to me. So their global community has participated in over 50,000 hours of deep work in the cave, which branding is on point, I have to say. And as a U.S. faculty member, Jake also is with the School of Life. So he teaches workshops, emotional intelligence for corporate teams. God knows we all need it. And is a creator and curator of a monthly email refrigerator. I don't know what that is, but we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
So wrapping it up, artist, entrepreneur, creative director, and low-key has his work permanently at the MoMA, as well as an honest parent's fridge, as he says, which again, copywriting game is on point. Jake, thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell me, or us really, a little bit more about your journey, like in your own words, and how it sort of has evolved over time?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know how far back to go. I started I've always been a creative person. I went to college thinking I was going to go work at Pixar, and so I studied film and animation.
Cool.
And got there and was like, oh, animation is really tedious. I'm not going to do that. So I sort of explored a little bit and found my way with the internships and new classes into the world of advertising. So sort of right out of college, I was an intern at an ad agency. I did that for about 7-8 years. And left to freelance and travel and thought, I'm done with advertising. I'm going to go learn how to code, and took a year off to do that. And then found my way. That was in LA. And then I moved to New York and came sort of back to advertising in the social impact space.
That's right.
Right. That's how we met.
We have a history. Yeah. We'll get into that too.
And yeah, so I did that for a little bit. I got fired, which is a whole other story that I'm sure we'll get into today. And that led me to freelance. And while I was freelancing, I started this little side, I wouldn't even call it a business. It was like a side project called Caveday. It was these events that we would run, bringing people together to work in this special way. And sort of for the last 6 years since Caveday's been around, I've sort of had like this freelance life, freelance business on my own, and building Caveday. And actually we just celebrated a year this month of Caveday being my full-time thing. So like a year ago, it sort of switched,
Amazing.
and Caveday was like 10, 15, 20% of my income. And then it switched, and now Caveday is like
Wow, that's
90% of
amazing.
my income.
That's
Um,
awesome.
so that's,
Congratulations.
thanks. Yeah,
That's
big
awesome.
step.
Yeah. Huge, huge.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, I know you've been a freelancer for a long time. I think that a lot of people are kind of wondering, like, can freelance be a real career, as traditionally you would label it? I guess I want to really understand to you, at what point did you decide that freelance was your trajectory, or you wanted to, I guess, make that your career, quote unquote? And
Hmm.
is that true? And like, what does that kind of mean to you in this context?
Um, I, to me, career is sort of loaded. Career, like making that my career, like feels like it comes with so much commitment. Like I'm afraid to even use that. Like, I made that my career. Like I'm, I'm, I'm like dabbling where I'm like I'm freelancing, like sort of like I'm dating, where it's casual. Um, and, and that, I guess that's how I see career, and that like decision to freelance feels much less like I'm committing to the rest of, I'm probably going to work for the next 40 plus years of my life. Like, I don't want to say that I'm going to freelance for the rest of my career. What I will say is like, this is the right direction for me now. And part of it, like, I mean, I know you probably have questions about like how I get into it, or my own, everyone's got their own freelance journey. Um, to me, my understanding of careers now, especially from my own experience, and like the more that at Caveday we talk a lot about career and career planning, um, is really like non-linear. Like
Mm,
so much of careers is about like, I don't know, I wanted to try this, and then I wanted to learn this other thing, and then I wanted to do this thing, and I feel like uh, talking about freelance as like your career choice is, again, like to me, comes with a lot of commitment, and that feels really heavy. Like that's a big decision, instead of like, what, I'm not interested in like working for someone else now. I'm interested in sort of exploring and working for myself, and seeing what kind of lifestyle I can design for myself. And look, if a year from now I meet someone who's like, we should start a business, or I meet someone else who's like, hey, you seem to be gravitating toward this, or I sort of permalance at this other company that like, I just love these people and they remind me nothing else of the place that I left and the reason I got into freelancing. Like, I don't think that feels like, I think that could feel like a failure. Like I chose freelancing and now I'm starting a business, or now I'm going full time or whatever. And I
mm,
think freelance as a direction, freelance as a transition, freelance as a like a long-term choice, I think is right per person. And so for me, like, um, it was right to get me to like build Caveday, and it allows me to like sort of supplement my income when Caveday needs it, or when I need it for, I have a mortgage and two kids now. So freelance is helpful for that, and I'm sure in the next 40 years, whether I have 100% of my income be freelance or not, freelance is now something that I know that I can do, instead
mm.
of thinking like freelance is my career choice. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. That totally makes sense. And what I hear you saying, I think too, is the like idea of freelance in and of itself is sort of almost the antithesis of career in its traditional
Right.
sense, right? And so like that optionality, that freedom, that flexibility, in and of itself is the choice, rather than trying to put a label on it or fit it into an existing box, I guess, that has a definition that is loaded, frankly, as in, like, I think a lot of people feel this way, right? Like one choice is going to be my life choice, or like put me on a trajectory that I can
Yeah.
never change or get off of, or whatever it is. And so people put a lot of weight into that and emphasis on that. And then they end up with like, what is it? Analysis paralysis, right?
Yeah.
Where they end up not being able to move forward because, they are thinking about it in the wrong way, basically. So I definitely resonate with that. And I think
Yeah.
that's really interesting, because I think that the definition of quote unquote career in and of itself is probably changing, as people are ebbing and flowing, not even just between jobs, but between full time, between freelance. I read like a few years back about, a few concepts around intermittent retirement,
Hmm.
instead of waiting
Oh,
till the
like
end
the
of your
Sagmeister.
40 years. Yeah, yeah, where it's like you work 5 years and then you do 1 year off, and then you work 5 years, 1 year off, and like you sort of structure your savings and things like that way. So I think that there's a lot of just really interesting new trends emerging, and I do think that remote work and the rise of that sort of opened up those doors for people to explore a lot of those things, which I'm also curious to get your thoughts on in that regard.
Yeah, I think even bigger than that, like, yes, remote work is helpful in that. I think there's a collective understanding that even like lifestyle design is different. Like people waiting to have kids or choosing not to have kids opens things up. People, choosing to like not only work from wherever, but like have different kinds of clients that allow me to like be local or remote, or things like Airbnb and apartment swaps sort of open up an even bigger way of thinking about like our lives and our careers and how we're designing it. So
totally. Oh my God. Yeah. We could go into a whole existential
yeah.
thing about how like physical institutions have dictated where we live and work for forever. And now that's gone. And now we're all like sitting around being like, what do I want? What do I like? I don't know
Yeah,
really.
I don't even know myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God. It's been an interesting 3 years, 2 years now. So when you are thinking about your business or your different businesses, really, because the way I see freelance is as a business more so than a career. How do you how has that sort of evolved over time in terms of your different revenue streams? Like you mentioned, your breakdown of income has shifted over the last year,
Yeah.
which is awesome. Like, how did you price across, workshops, speaking services, now software, and then like how do you manage all that and think about revenue streams?
Sure. There's a lot there. There's like how did I price it and how has it evolved over time? I'll try to see if I can answer all those. I think first, my understanding of freelance was really messed up in the beginning. In other words, like I came from the advertising world where like I don't know, like we had freelancers in the office all the time,
Yeah, you
and
didn't even know who was who or what was what most of the time
yeah,
in our office.
and my understanding of freelance was like you could sort of not have a full-time job anywhere, sort of have these projects that you'd work on, you'd come in the office and work, and that like you could make more money per day, and you could
Hmm.
sort of double dip a little bit, and so what I ended up doing for like the first maybe 2 or 3 years was I was not a freelancer. I was a contractor, and I didn't even
Mm.
understand the difference. But what ended up happening is the more that I started understanding the difference, and I'll define it in a second, like I was aiming for a freelance lifestyle. A
Hmm.
freelance lifestyle was like I'm in control of my time, I'm in control of when I work and where I work and how I work. Essentially, to me, the difference was like contract was just like I have a job. I'm like I'm working
An
five.
employee, a part-time
I'm an
employee.
employee.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm working 5 days a week, 9 to 5, 9 to 6 or whatever in an office. I have a desk, but like after this project I'm done. And that wasn't what I wanted. Like I didn't know the difference. I just thought like, oh, I'm freelancing. And when I started talking to like actual freelancers who were like, what, you're going to an office every day. Like I'm choosing my own clients, and I get to, it's like you're saying, I'm running a business, which is
Hmm.
you get to dictate, oh, I'm going to take on more clients, or this is what I charge. There's a lot more to that.
Hmm.
Contracting was sort of like, I know the recruiter, I know the creative director, they're going to bring
Sure.
me in, fine. Freelancing and like running your own business, when I started doing that more and more, was there's a lot of sales involved. Like I have to pitch myself. This is my offering. This is what it
Yeah.
costs. This
It's like
is
intention in it,
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the scope of work. I'm writing my own contracts. I'm saying like everything that Wethos does. You're like you've sort
Scope
of
of
solved
work.
that. I
That's
know
where
I hate
Wethos
that.
was born because that thing is a nightmare.
Um, it's funny. Can I actually? So I'm like a crazy list maker. So
I
I
love it.
have. Let's see if I can do this. So I have like my income breakdown like year over year,
Wow.
and this is 2018, and like 77% is in-house contracting.
Mm.
And over the years, like this is
Wow.
2020 and this is 2021. Um, you know, I'm
Wow.
I'm taking on less and less of those clients, and you can see the yellow is Caveday, like
Hmm.
3%, and then 9%, and then 10, 16%, and then last year
Wow.
it
Oh
was
my
six,
God.
63%.
Dude.
Um, so
That's
like
fucking amazing.
the, the categories are like in-house contracting, independent freelance, which is like I find the clients, I do that on my own, and then I do some teaching. Like I haven't done it in the last year or so, but like, oh, I'll run a workshop, or I used to like, was it like an adjunct at Parsons and whatever
Yeah,
for
yeah, that's right.
city college for a little bit. Um, and so, I mean, I love that I had a mix. And it's funny because my wife like loves the stability of a full-time job. And we
Mm,
talk all the time, or we used to talk all the time when I was like starting freelance, like which is a more secure job. And it was interesting because like, I've got like 5 or 6 different revenue streams. And even within those revenue streams, like my independent freelancing, I have like 3 or 4 clients at a
hmm.
time. And so it's like, if I lost a client, like, oh, I'm fine. I'm like, I have a slow month, or I have to do a little more biz dev or something. But it helped me flip the script that like a full-time job can sometimes be less stable.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I feel like I lost the thread of the conversation,
No,
but
no.
my journey is, as over time, went from like I go to an office every day, but I'm just a contractor, to like, oh, I find my own clients. I'm looking for, this kind of work. This is what I specialize in. And I'm going to turn stuff down if it doesn't fit stuff, or hand things off. And then, as you can see, like Caveday sort of took over in this last year.
Yeah, that's like an incredible representation of the progress over time, even because like, and how your business has evolved. And I do want to go back to a point that you just made about, full time versus freelance. I definitely think that the older school like way of thinking was that, yeah, like one full-time job is more secure, and maybe that even used to be true. But I think what the pandemic has unfortunately taught a lot of us is that like that one job, if it's gone, now you're left sort of high and dry. And so in a way, your revenue streams, having like a diverse set of revenue streams, is more secure, because if one goes down or something happens over here, you have something to fall back on, versus
Well,
having like full reliance on one
that's
role or job.
you mentioned before, like freelancing is running a business, and that's running a business, that you have
Yeah,
different
yeah.
revenue streams, because you can't put your whole weight on one client. You can't put your whole weight on one in revenue stream, because pandemic hits, you're out of business or whatever. Like,
Hmm.
so, I think that analogy, or that insight, is really apt.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to switch gears a little and talk about Caveday, because
Yeah,
I've seen the evolution over like the last couple of years, which has been so cool. And as a person who also did this journey to the services to software, which is funny because usually it goes the other way around. Usually people build software and then they're like, oh, my clients want services too, low
mm,
key. And then they end up like having a whole services arm, like Salesforce is a great example of that.
yeah.
But so anyway, I wanted to better understand, like, tell us a little bit more about like what Caveday is and like how it came to be, and how that's evolved, over time, from like being a service that you deliver to then actually becoming software. Because I know a
Yeah,
lot of folks don't know how to bridge that gap.
I have a hiccup on calling it software, but we'll get to
Okay, all
that.
right, yeah,
I'm
let's do
not
it.
sure that
Let's
I would
unpack it.
fully. I'm not sure that I would fully call it software. Anyway, so Caveday started again like as this little side project. It was not meant to be a business. My 2 co-founders and I met the summer of 2016, and we said, hey, we've got friends. We're all working on side projects on the weekend. Let's gather everyone and create a special kind of event. Like, we were all interested in community and branding and business, and so we said, I bet there's a way that we can gather everyone that's like more focused than a Starbucks, more fun than a library, more community and like gathering than a co-working space. And so it was just like we had a co-working space donated on a Sunday, and we said, all right, let's call it a cave day. Like, we're going to go into the cave for the day. It was a full day, 8.5 hours. We like learned all that we could about things like, body doubling, and how to take breaks, and how long
Mm,
our brain can focus before it needs a break, and how to take breaks, and those kinds of things. And so we designed this event and this brand that was just like a one-off event, and we sold tickets. We said, come get. It was January of 2017. We said, let's start off the year, get your work done, kick off the year with some focus. And we sold out. We had like 50 some tickets, and it was mostly our friends and friends of friends, and we got it catered and coffee and all that. And it really struck a nerve. Like we sold out. The three of us made like $200, and we were like, that was really cool, and I want to go out afterwards and like have a drink. I don't feel drained by working for 8 hours because
Mm.
we did this in a different way and we felt connected. It was about community. And it really quickly changed from like this event to, oh, we have to do this more. Like we were written up in Fast Company in like our second or third month. It was like, this is a new way of
Wow.
working. Um,
Yeah.
and so like companies started reaching out, like, how do you work with, I don't know, like we weren't a company. We were like three kids doing a little event,
You're like,
you know.
yes, I do have an enterprise package. Thank you for asking. Like, what are we gonna
Exactly.
do? Yeah.
No sales experience. Um, and it sort of grew and evolved. Like we never, it's been a very iterative process. So like really for the first year and a half, it was just like once a month we would run these all day events. And then we started doing half days during the week and having to build business on, we can't pay rent in New York City. We can't afford that. So it doesn't exist anymore, but Breather was a big thing,
Oh
like
yeah.
so we had this
I
like
totally did that.
relationship with Breather, which was great for freelancers. It was like these beautiful spaces all over the city that if you needed a client meeting or a photo shoot, like, you know, sort of Airbnb for workspaces, like by the hour, you had these beautiful workspaces. And we built a business on that. Like we would get a space every single day and, you know, be able to like, check, you know, where are we going to be? And we would run these events. And then, about 2 years into business, we like turned it into membership, and now we had like monthly recurring revenue. And I don't know, we're sort of like, why I don't want to call it software, even though it is, it just doesn't feel, we don't have a, you know, CTO, we don't have our own custom software yet. We are working with a team on building some of that right now. Spoiler alert. And like what we're doing is sort of piecing together software. We've got like a scheduling platform. We've got a membership platform. We use Zoom. We've got a community, you know, it's like we use Flexbooker and Circle and Memberspace, and we use Zapier to connect a lot of there, and we use Sendinblue to like manage our lists and you know, email marketing. And so I don't know that I would call it software, but like I guess it is. Like we're offering you know, essentially I think it's over 120 hours a week of facilitated work sessions. So I sort of skipped over the story for anyone really paying attention. It went from in person, and then we played with remote, and then even, you know, in 2018, way before the pandemic. And then when the pandemic hit, we shifted entirely remote. We started changing the price structure so that people from around the world could join. And then we like slowly added sessions. I think at the beginning of the pandemic, we had 12 sessions a week. And as I said, now we have like over 120.
Wow.
We've hired people from around the world to run sessions. We've hired a chief of staff to, anyway, I'm sort of telling the back end story. I don't know exactly what you're interested in. And then the front end of like, people come every day to, you know, get their work done, to change the way that they work. And rather than think about ourselves as like a productivity company that's like, get your shit done, it's like we think about it as improving your relationship to work, which is you know, about integrating breaks and self-care. It's about setting better boundaries. It's about learning how to scope your work better, so that at the end of the day, you're not like, that's it, I didn't get enough work done, I got to keep working. You're like, oh no, I scoped properly, I finished my work, I can put it aside because I did enough. So there's all these components of like improving your relationship to work beyond just like focus and get your work done. But our main
I mean,
product is Caves.
It's a pretty incredible like evolution though, because I think, well, what I hear you saying first and foremost in that is the demand is what drove the product. And so like the initial product, there was demand for it. I mean, you sold it out, and then that started to grow. And then suddenly when you had to go from, you know, the 12 sessions a week to slowly building up to like hundreds of sessions or 150, that's scale. And that's where software always comes in. Like that's exactly how our company evolved, right? Like we went from, you know, putting a team together for a client or two to deploying like 15, 20 teams a month. And that's when Claire, my co-founder, and I were like, oh my God, like scaling a service-based business is so hard. And that's where software really came in. And our first version too was a bunch of like no code tools sort of like strung together. Which is, you know, sort of lays the foundation. But it isn't, I think it is good for people to know and understand that like software doesn't necessarily just appear overnight. And I think that people make a mistake of skipping the phase of this like minimum viable product phase, and they end up spending a ton of money hiring developers and building a bunch of software that turns out people don't necessarily really need or want. So I think like starting with delivering it manually is always a better path. And even not even going from doing, even if there's demand for that, not even just jumping straight into custom software, but actually there's just
Oh
so
yeah.
many no code tools now that like you really can put an app together. You can put a marketplace together. You could put pretty much anything together with no code tools for an
You're
MVP, like a minimum viable product for sure.
Yeah, you're reminding me so much because like we're building a custom product now, and we've spent the last year actually building another one. The one that we're like hopefully going to launch this fall is we wanted to like get 24-hour coverage, right? Like we if we wanted to add
Yeah.
100 more hours a week, we need to hire more, and then each session we have to pay our facilitators, and so we've created a platform that sort of runs on the hour and is sort of self-guided and groups
Cool.
people in groups of 8 if you want to join, and if you're the ninth person, you put in another. Like it's really detailed software and it's almost ready. But yeah, you're reminding me that like so much of what we did leading up to like, great, we're going to invest, a lot of money for us.
Oh no, we lost sound a little there. Are you back? Oh, there you
Um,
go.
Sorry, I hit my screen time limit on Instagram. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. No, Instagram,
um,
fuck you. We're still talking.
yeah. But so much of what we did leading up to like, putting money towards this, and where I cut off, I think, was like, it's a lot of money for us, but we're a bootstrap company. Like we've never taken investment. We took a small loan at the beginning of the pandemic, so we could grow, and it's been super helpful. But yeah, there's tons of platforms that allow, sort of video hosting outside of Zoom that have some sort of customizable branding, and that we could facilitate and see, would people show up to this, and is this an equal uh, experience, or if not, what would you pay for it? And we did a lot of surveys and testing and trying new platforms and trying software for free, or like whatever, a trial, to okay, we could build our own and it's worth the investment.
Yeah, totally. So I want to zoom out for a little because I think you have a really interesting lens in which you've seen the shift, I think, around like our relationship to work, through the course of the pandemic. I think generally the pandemic reshaped a lot of the way, specifically, I think Americans view our lives and our work and what takes priority, et cetera. Have you seen that come to life through Caveday, and have you seen sort of behavioral or attitude shifts from 2019 to now, and how that's been affected?
yeah, I think the biggest one that kind of was like always there under the radar, that really like struck a nerve for a lot of people, and I'm speaking very generally here, is that like companies don't care about you. Like a lot of the research and reading that I'm doing is sort of like back in the 70s, with the introduction of consultants who are sort of like working with the C-suite on like, how do we make your company more efficient? A lot of the instruction was like, you can cut the fat, you can like, why are we paying this person who's on leave or injured, or like, it sort of like made companies worry about bottom line and stock prices, and focus less on like, you know, you've been here for 60 years, here's your gold
People,
watch. And
yeah,
right, so
yeah,
really like it started in the 70s, where people started getting laid off because the business performed poorly, instead of like, oh no, we love, Rachel, she's been with us forever, we're not going to lay her off. Like there's a people. So that, I think that happened in the 70s, and slowly it's been like, people have understood this idea of like, oh, I could work for myself, or no, the freelance movement kind of started around then. It was like, I'm going to open my own business, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, and I can sort of sustain a living like that. And sort of fast forward 50 years to 2020, where so many people are like, I can't believe I have to like be a parent and show up at work. I can't believe I have to, there's no help. There's nobody supporting what I need. There's no mental health support. There's no sort of recognition of like, we're all struggling, and you still want us to like write some headlines for Facebook ads that like are going to people who also are struggling. Like, so I think first, the biggest trend is an understanding that like nobody's looking out for me. Again,
Mm,
speaking broadly, and so there's, I think there, especially in the relevance of this conversation, this feeling of like I have to look out for myself. I have to
mm,
like find ways to generate revenue or go to my boss to ask for time off or ask for maternity leave or paternity leave or mental health leave or whatever it is that like I need to advocate for myself. I think that's a big one. Um, and I mean, if it's not obvious, it feels obvious to me because I'm in this world and I hear about it all the time. But like the lack of boundaries,
mm,
that when we work from home, it feels like we live at work. Like
mm.
like there's no boundaries. I wake up, I'm at the office. Like this is where I work. So I guess I'll check my email. And I mean, what Caveday's position on that is like trying to create better boundaries, creating rituals that like I do something to start my workday. I like brew a cup of coffee and I start my workday. And at the end of the day, I brew a cup of tea, and that's sort of like my bookend. Or I like go have a fake commute. I walk around the block in the morning. I do the same thing in the afternoon. And until I do that, I'm at home. I'm working. I'm not working. I'm not going to check my emails because I'm not at work. Um, and like I know that's an ideal situation because so many of us have bosses or managers who are just like they have bad boundaries and they're just like texting on a Saturday because they live at work too.
Mm.
So I think that idea of understanding, realizing that like one, I have to look out for myself. I have to be my own advocate, and two, the boundaries are really blurry, and if I don't create them, they're going to sort of take over.
Totally. And I think you made a lot of really good, you had a lot of really good insights, I think, throughout that. And I think too, on the last point around, boundaries, I always say this, like going remote in and of itself is an operating strategy, in my opinion. Like a handful of tools aren't going
Mm,
to fix your company's culture if was a lack of boundaries to begin with. If you were going home every night from the office and answering emails on your phone, that's certainly not going to go away once you're remote. And
yeah,
I think too many people think that the solution to these, really what they are, is the culture problems, are tools and things to monitor, and well, that's a whole other conversation, like what people are doing, when in reality it does come down to, do you trust the people that you work with, and how are you actually measuring success in that regard. And I just think that, like, especially the pandemic, a lot of companies had to kind of look in the mirror, and like the problems that they were already there just got exacerbated. And then, they had to sort of rethink how they're actually operating, or rather last and long enough to resist it,
yeah.
which
Well, let's
we're
talk about
seeing
like
some of that right now.
what do you see as some of the problems? I have thoughts, but like when you're saying like they exacerbated some of the problems, like what do you what do you what do you think?
Yeah. So when I had a full-time job way back when, before I started the company, uh, fundamentally the idea of like sitting in a seat at my desk for literally no reason because my boss was still there drove me crazy. Because to me, like, I felt like I was like able to perform and like kind of deliver the work in whatever time frame before it really needed to happen. And the fact that I couldn't leave work at 5 because my boss doesn't leave until like 6 or 7, so I would just literally sit there wasting time, my time.
Yeah,
And the thing about that really bothers me, I think, is that like time's the only thing none of us can get back. So like money comes and goes, anything else you can lose and maybe you get it back. Time you cannot get back. So that feeling really, really frustrated me. And so when we started the company, and God knows we're not perfect, let me be clear, but Claire and I, really sat down and we wanted to think about, like, how do we work? How do we work together? We've been remote since I think 2018, 2017 or 2018. And that, I think, really opened our eyes to how to create a culture of flexibility, and really it comes down to trust. And the way that we know whether or not folks are doing what they should be doing is just straight up, like, we set goals and we're either
yeah,
hitting those goals and delivering on those initiatives, or we're not. And that is super clear. And so we threw out the idea of like a rigid kind of 40-hour work week a long time ago. However, when it comes to boundaries, that's super important too. And so, especially when you're working across different time zones, I think it is up to the company to set up a culture in which you are not expected at a company level, meaning the executives are not expecting you to be answering emails outside of your working hours, because we have everybody, if they're in different time zones, they set their own working hours on their calendar, so we know. And then, as much as we can, we try to schedule to, send the next day or send the night before, or we just make it super explicitly clear, like, hey, no response needed right now. I'm just sending this because I'm online and I'm currently working through something or thinking about it. So I think it is a little bit of company and a little bit of, but itself, because if you can't personally have boundaries and hold that accountable, then there's only so much a company can do to not make you work on weekends and nights if you can't control, your own boundaries.
Yeah. I mean, I think some of the problems that you're talking about are about trust, are about poor management or management training. Like, like I'm a new manager. I don't know what I'm doing. And so the only way that I can make sure that my team is doing their work is like, I got to see them every day. I need them in the office, or this is the way that I work and this is what's best for me, without understanding other people. I think cultures, what you're saying is like also top down, like all of that culture trickles down, where like if the boss does it, nobody's going to not do that.
100%.
And I think cultures, old work cultures often, prioritize like morning people and extroverts and like the way that you run meetings. And the biggest thing that I think I want to pull out of what you said is actually the idea of like shared agreements, that like there's almost no expectation. It's like it's not like I expect you to be online over the weekend, because expectation is like unspoken. It's like, this is what I feel, this is what I want. And what you're moving towards is like shared agreements over expectations, that like when we can have agreements that like, if you're offline, you're offline. You're allowed to be offline on the weekends. You're like, and we have like a manifesto. We've created a set of agreements, or I don't even call them rules, but that helps build culture more than, a ping pong table or a virtual happy hour or something.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I think it is definitely about setting an example as much as humanly possible. And I think also, we learned this in running our business before, we got to this point, when we were in like real chaos, which was like, if we're running around all the time with our heads cut off, like something operationally is not right. Like you know what I mean? Like, so we just found ways, like having a consistent week schedule. So we already know we're going to be touching base Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So like, there's no need to be like 911 on a Thursday night. Like, I'll just talk to you tomorrow. So we, but it's taken a long time, and of course, like nothing's perfect, and we're always trying to, find better ways to do things. And I think
look at that.
That with more people doing it, like, we could all find better solutions, thankfully.
Well, I think what you're talking about feels inefficient, but what you're talking about is so important, which is like, you're still figuring it out. You're still working through it. You're still testing things out. And it feels inefficient because like talking about how you work is not getting your work done. And like so much of our focus, and so much like, I could probably talk for another hour about like the Industrial Revolution and hustle culture, and this like we got to work like machines and produce. But like, when you zoom out and you're like, did we like how that meeting ran? Like, what's not working about our process this month? Like, let's zoom out. Let's talk about how we work. It feels inefficient because you're not getting your work done, but like, that is how you get better work done. Like, let's take an hour to do a retro. Let's take a 3 hour, a whole morning every quarter to like, share what was good and not, because all of that
we do
stuff,
retros every quarter. What worked, what didn't work, what did we learn?
Builds trust, builds culture.
Wish we had, like, just all those things. And also, I think it encourages people to talk about problems and share problems, and then find solutions to those problems, and not pretend they don't exist. Which is terrible. So I want to ask you one last question, which kind of zooms all the way out. I'm curious, like, what do you think freelance starts to look like in the next 10 years? And I'm going to sort of ask the classic question of like, what do you think will change? And then what do you think will not change? What will stay the same?
It feels like it will sort of be what's the word I'm thinking? Like, I think everyone will dabble in freelance by the end of their career. Like maybe not 10 years from now, but like this next generation of people coming out of school will likely dabble in freelance in some way over the
Mm-hmm.
whole their career. I think part of that, what I'd like to see in the future, is the idea of, um, I want to call it like unionizing, but I don't necessarily mean union. I sort of mean like a shared collective, like going away from like what we talked about, that like the company doesn't care for me, so I got to take care of myself. But now sort of refinding that sense of, hey, I have a group that will take care of me a little bit within the freelance world, and saying like, look, I know that there's something that there's something called the freelancers union, and there's little orgs like that. But places where it's like I can get my health benefits from them, or like the way that Wethos, when your early days of your software, where you like talked about pricing and having this like understanding of what other people charge, like it's the more that we can share that, the better our businesses get, and the more that we benefit, not our clients and not any like. So I love this vision of like freelancers bonding together and unionizing and sharing information, and helping each other out and creating collectives that are like, um, we work better together. Like I need a freelance, biz dev person who can do the sales, and as I get bigger, I need a copywriter who can like crush my website and like just do more things. And freelance doesn't have to be like all for all for
Alone,
one,
yeah.
or not one for one for all. Like it's sort of like we can think about this more collectively, that like the more that we're building these sort of interconnected businesses and knowledge bases, that like all of our work gets elevated, and we can create even more interesting things. Because I think oftentimes what the struggle of freelance is like, oh, last year I designed a website for an acupuncture studio. Like totally cool, totally legitimate. I love the clients, they were great. But like when I was working at the agency, like, I made a VR campaign and outdoor billboards for Facebook. Like there's just like an impact and a scale that it feels like most freelancers don't get. And I think when we can think about banding together and collaborating and sharing, that like that elevates all of our work.
Yeah,
What
I
will
love that.
remain the same, I think, is I think this desire to be in control. That like
Mm.
freelance is about, I don't want to work for anyone else. I want to decide my lifestyle. I want to, I'm a nomad. I want to work late at night. You should be able to do that. Like, I think hopefully the pandemic has sort of opened up this awareness of individual work habits, and how freelance is one option to like be your best.
Yeah, I love that. I think that there's so much power in what you said there, and that's exactly, like our vision around all that pricing data is a great example of that. It's collective action. If we band together, we are stronger as a group than we are standing alone, for sure. And like every political movement forever has shown us that.
Yeah.
And I think like really like that's where, like that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, like that grassroots movement where we build from the ground up, and we really have the power of data, have the power of information, and we're armed with that. That is going to create 10 times more viable and lucrative careers for everybody. And I agree, because especially with those big agencies, man, like they're charging millions of dollars for that kind of stuff,
Right.
and three people could split a $30,000 contract and be taking home way more revenue than they might have been just trying to win projects alone. And so that definitely is in line with like our ultimate vision. And I think the empowerment aspect, feeling in control and feeling like you can affect your trajectory and your future and secure that and be able to provide for your family. I think that is going to become even bigger of a thing than it is right now. I mean, half the workforce is projected to be freelance in the next 5
Yeah.
years. I'm pretty sure like half of Gen Z is already freelance. So I definitely can. I'm personally just like super excited for the next 10 years. I think if there's one thing that I walk away from so many of these conversations feeling, it's like super hopeful.
Yeah.
That's honestly just like listening to people's stories just makes me really hopeful for the future. And there is definitely a shared understanding and a shared desire to help not just yourself, but your community, the people around you, and to uplift everybody. And it honestly, it gives me a lot of hope for the future. All right, Jake, last thing, one piece of advice for folks looking to take the leap into freelance. What do you got?
When you had sent me that question ahead of time, and the first thing I wrote down was like, start before you're ready, like just get into it. And then I was like, I don't like that. Like, I don't know that I would want to hear that. If I had a full-time job, I think that's a scary thing. I don't think that's good advice that I wouldn't want to take. So I thought about this for a long time, and here's my takeaway. Like, nobody does, or, yeah, nobody freelances to get rich. Like, you are not about to like strike it rich. Even if you can separate time and money, like I have no more hourly rate, I just have project rates, I can work whenever, and I charge a lot from, like, you could do well, you could maybe do better than full time, but you don't, almost nobody freelances for the money. The money is okay, the money is good depending on where you are. You do it for the lifestyle. You do it for the lifestyle design. You do it for the ability to, again, like, be your best and say, I need to be in control of my time. I do my best thinking in the morning. And if I have stupid meetings in the morning, I'm wasting my best time every day. I feel like, hey, I'm in my 20s. I want to go explore. No job is going to let me do that. I need to go do that. Or I have a photographer friend who like often will trade he does like wedding photos sometimes, and he does these crazy extravagant weddings at like far off island resorts, and he'll do them for free to just have the experience of like getting free travel. And I think that like that doesn't happen with a full-time job. That doesn't happen when you're, just an entrepreneur running a software company or something. Like it's about putting yourself out there and creating opportunities for you to do the kind of things in your life that you've always wanted to do, and allow your work to fit around that.
I love that. I think we'll end on that note, honestly, because it's just like, I think you summed it up honestly perfectly. Jake, if people want to follow along on your journey or follow along or check out Caveday, where can they do that?
We are at Caveday and caveday.org. You can find me at jakekahana.com.
Amazing. Jake, thank you so much again for the honestly super meaningful conversation and the time and sharing just your really honest experience. It really helps. Every little bit helps. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Rachel, for having me, and keep doing what you're doing. Wethos is needed in the world.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, folks, we're going to be back actually next week. We have 2 back-to-backs next week and the following week. And next week, I'm going to be dialing in from New York, not Nashville, where I'm at right now. So we'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great evening, everyone.
Bye.
See you later.